What is less certain is the immediate future of Venezuela. I remain deeply concerned that rules of international law have not been respected with regard to the 3 January military action.
The method currently used is neither officially supported nor approved. France's position once again is clear. President Trump's action goes against international law.
Indeed, it's worth recalling that Nicolas Maduro lacked the legitimacy of a democratically elected leader. Therefore, the events over the weekend provide the opportunity for a democratic transition led by the Venezuelan people.
World leaders are sharply divided after U.S. forces captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife in a dramatic operation. Several major powers, including Russia, China, Iran, Brazil, and Cuba, condemn the move as a violation of Venezuela's sovereignty. The UN leadership said that it remains deeply concerned about violations of international law following recent U.S. military action in Venezuela that led to the capture of President Nicolas Maduro. Speaking on behalf of Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Under-Secretary General Rosemary DiCarlo said he has repeatedly emphasized the need for all parties to fully respect international law, including the UN Charter, as the basis for global peace and security.
What is less certain is the immediate future of Venezuela. I am deeply concerned about the possible intensification of the instability in the country, the potential impact on the region, and the precedent it may set for how relations between and among states are conducted. Mr. President, the latest developments follow a period of heightened tensions beginning in mid-August, as discussed in this Council on 2 previous occasions. I have consistently stressed the imperative of full respect by all for international law, including the Charter of the United Nations, which provides the foundation for the maintenance of international peace and security. I remain deeply concerned that rules of international law have not been respected with regard to the 3 January military action. The Charter enshrines the prohibition of the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. I call on all Venezuelan actors to engage in an inclusive, democratic dialogue in which all sectors of society can determine their future. This entails the full respect of human rights, the rule of law, and the sovereign will of the Venezuelan people. I also urge Venezuela's neighbors and the international community more broadly to act in a spirit of solidarity and in adherence to the principles, laws, and rules erected to promote peaceful coexistence. I welcome and am ready to support all efforts aimed at assisting Venezuelans in finding a peaceful way forward.
China accused Washington of a blatant use of force and urged respect for Venezuela's right to choose its own path. Beijing also called for the immediate release of Maduro and his wife, warning against further escalation.
China has demanded the immediate release of Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro and his wife from U.S. custody. Can you comment on whether there will be consequences for the U.S. if China's demand goes ignored? Also, the Chinese diplomats were meeting with Nicolas Maduro just before his capture by the U.S. Can you confirm whether those Chinese diplomats are still in Caracas?
On your first question, China had stated its position on the U.S. forcibly seizing President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. China expresses grave concern over the U.S. forcibly seizing President Nicolas Maduro and his wife and taking them out of the country. The U.S. move is in clear violation of international law, basic norms, international relations, and the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. China calls on the U.S. to ensure the personal safety of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, relieve them at once, stop toppling the government of Venezuela, and resolve issues through dialogue and negotiation. On the second, China is closely watching the situation in Venezuela. So far, there has not been any report about Chinese personnel in Venezuela being affected by the U.S. airstrikes.
France said President Donald Trump's actions run counter to international law and cannot be supported. French government officials stress that the method used undermines legal norms and people's freedom. Earlier, French President Emmanuel Macron said Venezuela's opposition leader should help oversee a transition of power.
The method currently used is neither officially supported nor approved. France's position once again is clear. President Trump's action goes against international law. We have always defended and will always defend international law because it is the condition for global stability and peace. That being said, this is a dictator we're dealing with, and so we take that into account. His departure is, and these are the words of the President of the Republic, good news for the Venezuelan people. France finally is clear-eyed. We do not simply condemn or comment on what has happened. The world has become tougher, and France must prepare itself in this world once again, which is hardening with a rearmament, a military rearmament, an economic rearmament, notably with the increase in defense resources, which must be included in the 2026 budget.
Meanwhile, Germany demanded that the United States explain the legal basis for its actions to the international community. Cuba's president, Miguel Díaz-Canel, denounced the operation and urged an urgent international response. Iran's foreign ministry called the move an act of aggression and a breach of the UN Charter. Brazil's president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, said the action recalls dark chapters of political interference in Latin America. He warned that it threatens the region's status as a long-standing zone of peace. European Union leaders urged restraint as tensions continue to rise. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen echoed calls for a lawful solution.
The fact that Maduro was not considered the legitimate president of Venezuela, is that reason enough to justify or at least tolerate this military intervention? And second, how do you feel about the fact that the United States intends to run, well, that's what they say, they intend to run Venezuela or at least coerce the country into submissive behavior? Is this something that you support in order to remove a regime that was hostile to the European Union? Thank you.
We say on that, first of all, indeed, it's worth recalling that Nicolas Maduro lacked the legitimacy of a democratically elected leader, and therefore the events over the weekend provide the opportunity for a democratic transition led by the Venezuelan people. Now, we also recalled in this very same context the need to abide by international law and the UN Charter. That's recalled in the statement. It is also recalled in the post from the President. And on your question on running the country, it's obviously for the Venezuelan people to run the country, as it is for any people across the world. Wherever and whatever country we're talking about. In the back.
Jack Parrick, also from DW. A question on this. There's been like 3-4 days now, maybe, so you've had time to look at it. How would you term the US actions in Venezuela? Is it an invasion, an intervention, an act of aggression, an external coup? We're brilliant in Brussels at coming up with the words. What is the terminology that the Commission is going to use on this? Thanks.
Thank you, Jack. Listen, we haven't really discussed how we are calling it. I don't think that's the most relevant in the matter. As said, these events create the opportunity for a democratic transition in Venezuela. And create the opportunity for a transition led by the Venezuelan people. Jack, a follow-up.
So if we're not going to call a spade, we're calling this an opportunity for a democratic transition. That's what the EU believes has happened here.
Words, I just said what this creates as a context, and that we expect and hope this will be the possibility seized by the Venezuelan people.